Go to Daniel chapter 7, of all places. This word came to me earlier, this one word, and I think it's something that we should lay hold of. You know, it says, Daniel 7:1, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions in his head. And as he was lying upon his bed, then he wrote down the dream and told the gist of the matter. That was the word. He told the gist of the matter. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, you know, you're looking at the world through those screens that you have, and you're listening to everything going on, and you see we saw this whole Charlie Kirk supposed, you know, assassination or murder this week or so ago. And you know, they first had the official story, you know, and they had got the guy running across the roof, and you know, and all these different things they say about it, and the guy in the audience that's distracting, and another guy in the audience that's doing this, and then days go by, and of course the internet just blows up, right? I mean, it just, you know, and you know, all the ballistic stuff. Interesting, we're not hearing from Ted Nugent. Where are you, Ted? Yeah, Ted Nugent. Yeah. Not really that surprising. He was George W. Bush's neighbor down in Crawford. So, come on, you know, they're all the neocon, MAGA, not MAGA, but neocon people. Bunch of tough talkers that don't have much spiritual understanding, but and you see all these different scenarios about this shooting, and then you hear all these different things about his wife, and you hear 5 or 6 different scenarios about where the bullet came from, and you know, to the point where there was actually supposedly a $60,000 hologram machine in the tent that he was sitting, and and there was a hatch door, a trap door in the bottom of it, and all these different things, and there's lots of people out there talking about it, probably millions of people talking about it, and they want to know the truth, and you know, well, they want to get to the bottom of this, and then you have Kash Patel. Is that his name? Kash Patel? Interesting. It's all about money, you know. Kash Patel. And he's telling, you know, his brother, you know, Charlie Kirk, his brother, you know, they're all best friends now, you know, that he'll see him in Valhalla. And so Tammy looked up Valhalla, and she's reading all about it to me. And it has to do with, you know, the occult knowledge and, you know, the Nordics and all these kinds of things, gods that they appease or pray to or what have you. And the last one was the one that he was the one talking about, and it's warriors that keep going to do valiant things and die, and then they get their life back, and they get to go do valiant things again and die and get their life back. So, you know, and so, you know, people will throw up their hands and go, well, who knows? Who knows the truth? Well, don't do that. Don't just throw up your hands. Keep educating yourself, because even if it's wrong, you're learning something. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a process to all of it. And the process is just to stay engaged. Now, You don't have to know every detail about everything that goes on. In fact, you're not going to. Only God can know all that. But he wants us to know the gist of the matter. You know, get a good working understanding on how the world really runs. Don't be dumb sheep. You know, we say it all the time, you know, be wise as serpents. Well, okay, so we say it all the time. The word didn't change, didn't it? And Jesus was warning them about that. You know, I'm going to send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. You know, be wise as serpents, or beware of the leaven of the Herodians and Sadducees and Pharisees. You know, the religious people and the political people. And everything you're seeing out there, everything is deception. It's deception. That's the way they live their life. It's their world. You know, look at, you know, we quote this a lot too, back in Psalm 73. You know, that 2 Timothy 3:1, you know, how does he say? Times of great stress and trouble, hard to deal with and hard to bear. Well, welcome to the show, folks. I mean, this ain't the Andy Griffith show here. You know? And it's at every level. I mean, it can be at your family level or your relationship level, and it goes all the way up to national level and global level. It's at every level. And what you're dealing with is Satan. And you're dealing with what he's doing in the world. And we're all being affected by it. You like to think you're not, but you are. You're being affected by it. Well, I'm a spirit-filled Christian. I love God. Well, then you're being affected by it even more because you're a target for him. And, you know, the psalmist, Asaph, you know, even in that time, he was describing a day like today. It was in his time on that level, maybe not, definitely not on the level it is today, but it's the same stuff. You know, just like we've talked about, you know, King Herod putting all the babies to death because he wanted to kill baby Jesus, right? So he killed all the children 2 years old and younger because, you know, he was titled from the Roman Senate King of the Jews or King of Kings, right? And, you know, Nebuchadnezzar got that title too. He said, he told him, you are a king of kings, right? Well, in this world he was. And see, everybody, you know, I remember that song, Tears for Fears or something. Everybody wants to rule the world. Remember that song? Everybody, yeah. Well, that's the way it is. You've heard the song before. I just don't want to sing it for you. But that's the way the world is. You know, and here's this psalmist, and he's describing it. And verse 12, behold, these are the ungodly who always prosper and are at ease in the world. They increase in riches. Surely then in vain have I cleansed my heart and washed my hands in innocency. You know, for all day long I've been smitten and plagued and chastened every morning. Well, you know what? If you're left out of God's chastising, you're not true sons. It says that in Hebrews chapter 12. You know, he disciplines those he loves. He's hardening you to difficulties. He's making, you know, Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered. So why shouldn't you? Had I spoken thus and given expression my feelings, I would have been untrue and have dealt treacherously against the generation of your children. But when I considered how to understand this, it was too great and effort for me and too painful. Okay, well, you get that. You know, you read about all this evil in the world and you see the videos and you're trying to sort it out. Why? Why do we do that? Why does anybody, you know, people say, well, I don't believe that stuff, you know, but they'll sit there in front of Fox News and listen to it like it's the gospel truth. So how are they doing anything different than what I'm doing? They're not. They're just not. They just don't pick a very reliable source. That's not a reliable source. That's mainstream, owned by the oligarchs of the world, and they're going to give you their narrative to steer the population away from what's really happening so they can pull a whammy on everybody anytime they want to. And probably all of this stuff is just that. It's just a big old whammy. It's a big old distraction because they're going to change all the money and make it digital, and we may be going into World War III. You know, they're calling all the brigadier generals and above to Virginia this next week, and all over the world. They're bringing them all in, and they're going to have a meeting, so something's up. And, you know, and they just changed the Department of Defense to the Department of War. Well, that kind of tells you that, you know, there shall be wars and rumors of wars. This might not be just a rumor. This could be a war to end all wars, as they said about World War I think. But, you know, it was just too painful a thing for this psalmist. Well, don't let it be too painful a thing to you. Stay engaged. And find people that you can, I'm talking to the internet audience really mostly here because, you know, this group here, we have each other, you know, and we talk about, you know, those who talked often one to another, and a book of remembrance was written about them in Malachi chapter 3. Well, it's good to have people that you can sort these things out with. I was talking to Ray and Ellen on the phone today, had them both on the phone today. This would have been a great podcast. I mean, we got into it. It was a beauty. Man, we hung up and we're like, wow. We talked about everything. But he says, until I went into the sanctuary of God, and then I understood their end. Okay, that's where Daniel's saying, he told me the gist of the matter. He was like, oh, I get this. I understand. Now, Daniel later in the chapter said he didn't understand, and there was nobody there to teach him. Well, you know, those things were sealed until our time, till the time of the end. And we're getting a lot of revelation from what Daniel wrote back then, now that he never got. But yes, it is a painful thing until you put it in the, see it through the lens of what God is doing. That's what I'm trying to say. When you see it through the lens of what God is, I'm not saying God's doing that. He's not doing it. He's not doing all that stuff out there. Satan's doing that, and people are following and being deceived by Satan, and they're doing it. And God's trying to save them, and they're being stubborn, and they're trying to do what they're trying to do. But for God's people, you got to see it through His lens, or it's just gloom and doom. See, when you don't look at it through the lens of Jesus Christ, who's sitting at the right hand of God right now making intercession for you, is one day going to stand up and going to come back. And He is going to judge this world, and He is going to come back and rule this world from Jerusalem at the end of Daniel's 70th week. And I'll show it to you on the timeline in a minute. You have to see that, because if you don't, you'll lose hope. Or you're looking at it wrongly and you're going to be deceived. I'm seeing Spirit-filled Christians on the internet that jumped on the whole Charlie Cook, what's his wife's name? Erica bandwagon. These people, they're so mixed up with MAGA and that whole global political movement. Remember, that's the leaven of the Herodians. And those are the same people. I mean, if Kash Patel is MAGA, which he is, and he wouldn't be in that position if he wasn't, is talking about Valhalla and the Nordics and all this occult knowledge, you know, you think, well, that stuff ain't real, you know, that stuff's just a bunch of garbage, you know. Hey, these people believe it. These people are involved in it big time. These people are high level in it. And, you know, it's like I was telling my dad a couple nights ago, because he lives with us now, so he gets to hear some of this stuff sometime. And it comes up, and if he asks me a question, I'll let him have it. And he likes it. And I you know, he was talking about the Windsors, you know, King Charles and all that group. And he was talking about Trump being over and all this. And I said, yeah, you notice how easy Trump is around them. That's because he's one of them. And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you know, he's German too. And he goes, what? And I said, yeah, the Windsors are Germans. You know, the King Charles is a German. They're all Germans. The Queen was German. That's where they came from. I don't know why England puts up with it, to be honest with you. It's just, they're just robbing that nation. And they live like kings and queens. And but anyway, I was telling my dad, well, he's German, and I said, yeah, his name is Drumf, Drumpf. In Germany, that was his ancestors' names. And when they came to America, his grandfather or great-grandfather, they made their money in the Yukon when they had the gold rush in prostitution and liquor. And that's when they started getting wealthy and, you know, getting a taste of, you know, what big money's about. And, you know, they wanted to be movers and shakers. And he goes, so they're all Germans? And I said, yes, they're all Germans. And, you know, this is where the whole Valhalla Nordic connection comes in. You know, and when I speak of Nordics, I'm talking about interdimensional beings. You know, people call that extraterrestrials. Well, I don't think that's a good term for it. I think interdimensional is a better term for it, because they're spirits. And I was asking Ray and Ellen today, you know, I have a lot of questions for them. And well, do you think some of them are that they hear from these interdimensional beings, and, you know, it convinces all of them, you know, and they get power from it. I mean, Adolf Hitler was into that, with the Vladi and all that stuff. You know, they would get power from you know, perverted sex or sacrificing children, and they would receive this power from it. And they would have these seances. I mean, even people on our side of the pond too, like, one of the, was it Eleanor Roosevelt?
Eleanor Roosevelt,
yeah.
Abraham Lincoln's wife.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln's wife, doing seances. And see, they want this knowledge. They want this experience. Well, God forbids it, and you'd be better to stay away from it, but people get into it. And see, I'm telling you the gist of the matter. See, because you don't do it, and you're like, oh, that's so weird. Well, it ain't to them. To them it's, no, we want this. They want that like you want revelation knowledge from the Lord. And it's a counterfeit. See, they're the ones that, he goes on until I went into the sanctuary of God, and then I understood there. And after all, you do set the wicked in slippery places. You cast them down to ruin and destruction, and how they become a desolation in a moment. They are utterly consumed with terrors. Well, that's what's coming to them. See? And, none of them can have eternal life. I was watching a little clip today of Putin and Xi, I guess is the leader of China, and they were talking about living forever, and that they could just keep changing bodily organs out. And they said, well, we could easily live to 150 years of having this conversation. Well, this is what these people want. I mean, when you get to be a mega billionaire, you don't want to die. You're just like, wow, this is fun. And so this is part of the gist of the matter. And, they don't have a problem with anybody else. Kash Patel probably comes from a Hindu background. Well, so do the teachings of the Nordics and Valhalla and all that. And Adolf Hitler was into that. And the Nazis were into it. And the Iranians were into it back in the day. And the swastika came from India, right? And these are all things that are occultic, that the leaders of the world, that he puts in slippery places. See, it don't work out well for them. And you need to understand that those things, like in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, that those things are coming to pass. And this whole era of Satan ruling the world is right at the cusp of coming to an end. And so it's no wonder that all of this stuff is coming out, and it's coming to a crescendo. I remember Ray did a mountain, and he had the occult sons of God on this side and God's sons of God on this side, and they're having a race to the top. Right? And see, they think they're going to get there. They think they're going to win. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. And God knows we're going to win, provided we stay with Him in the faith. See, Satan always copies God. He we read it last, and I shall be as God. Right? That's what Satan believed. Right? And so all these people out there in that world, they're all going for it. They flash the hand signs and the this and the that, and behind the scenes, they're into it. They're not playing games. They're into it. And they'll step on and crush anybody they have to get there. 1 Corinthians 2:6, yet when we are among the full-grown, spiritually mature Christians who are ripe in understanding, we do impart a higher wisdom, a knowledge of the divine plan previously hidden. But it is indeed not a wisdom of this present age or of this world, nor of the leaders and rulers of this age, who are being brought to nothing and are doomed to pass away. I mean, that says it right there. That's getting the gist of the matter, folks. See, we're not talking about, if you want to talk about dying and going to heaven, then you're in the wrong class. This ain't that class. That class was way back there when you were singing, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. That's long ago. You should have been well versed in all that. This is not that class. We're in the class that Jesus is coming back to rule and reign, and He's going to remove death from you so that you don't die at all, and that you rule and reign with Him until for that 1,000 years, and after that there's a new sky and a new earth, and God comes to tabernacle with man. And God will fulfill the Feast of Tabernacles then. And there's no longer need for a temple in that holy city, the New Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven, where God and Jesus live with us, right? With the 12 varieties of fruit and the river and all that golden streets. See, that's not heaven. That's the New Jerusalem. And it's very amateurishly taught that that's heaven. Well, God's there, so it's heavenly. But point being is that this is a knowledge of the divine plan that was previously hidden. But it's not hidden now because we're telling you about it. You know, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end, Daniel. But here we're at the time of the end, so it's not shut up and sealed. And we're telling you through the scriptures that what you're seeing out there on the internet and you're trying to figure it out. See, everybody's trying to figure it out because a vast majority of people have woken up all over the world and they're going, hey, you know that 9/11 thing? You know, no wonder they had it on September 10th, this killing. Because so many people are waking up about 9/11, they were probably afraid to go another year. Probably their AI was telling them, man, you can't go another anniversary. You're gonna have to cover this up because people are figuring out that was not what they told us it was. And if that, then all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing this other stuff for a long, long time. And it's nasty. It's as nasty as it gets. And it goes on every day, all day, for really since the beginning of the world. You know? And every nation has had its version of it. But now we live in the time of mighty Babylon. When John the Revelator saw it, you know, he was aghast. He was like, oh, wow. Yeah, I bet he would. Because you can't imagine the evil that goes on. Because you don't live like that. Most of you were raised and born in very decent families, and even before you came to Jesus, you just didn't live that way. You didn't think about those. You didn't rub shoulders with these kinds of people. And so he says, but rather what we are setting forth is a wisdom of God once hidden from human understanding, now revealed to us by God, that wisdom which God devised and decreed before the ages for our glorification. Now, that's what they're looking for. All these people out there, these rich fat cats in the world that are doing all these arms deals and all these war deals and have their mansions and jets and islands and any kind of pleasure they want to be glorified. They want that, but they can't have it. They think they can get it, and they're going to go for it. But God has it for us, but you got to do it through Him. You know, it's like you're trying to get to the tree of life by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that don't work that way. You see what happened to Adam and Eve because of that. You see, that wasn't a casual thing. You know, that wasn't just a little oops, we ate the apple thing. I mean, that's just so simplified and so amateurish. So it's just stupid to think in those terms. No, what they did was really, really wrong. And that's why Look at that in Genesis chapter 3. That's why he had to stop them from going back in there, after Adam and Eve had eaten of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And who beguiled Eve into doing it? The serpent. The serpent who was more cunning than all the beasts of the field, right? Why would he do such a thing? Folks, that's the gist of the matter. People don't want to believe that Satan really exists. And yet Satan, he's ruining your life every day. He's trying to send you to an early grave and make you miserable before you get there. And if he can get you on his team, he'll give you riches and fame and pleasure and everything so that you can drag down a bunch of others as you go. But there you're going. But after they did that, in verse 22, Genesis 3:22, is the Lord God said, "Behold, the man is become like one of us, to know good and evil, blessing and calamity. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever." And the sentence ends. Right? "Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. So God drove out the man, and he placed at the east end of the garden the cherubim and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep and guard the way to the tree of life." See, if he was in the fallen state because he took of that, he lost his dominion. Because you only can get the true dominion through God. And you can only get and have eternal life through God. And it's got to be the way God says to do it. And you can't get it with your mind. You can't get it with occult knowledge. You can't get it. You can't have it. They may get some semblance of it, and he's saying, hey, unless they eat of the tree of life and live in that state forever. Oh, what a tragedy that would be, right? So he put the cherubim there with the flaming sword and didn't allow them in again. That's the gist of the matter. This is the world we live in. We need to understand these things. These people that are running the world, they get all this occult knowledge through their proteges in universities and these Ivy League colleges, and through their Masonic connections and their occult connections, and they're into it. And they're serious about it. And most of Christianity, sadly, is not into their Christianity to that kind of level. They're just into Christianity enough that a day or two ago, there should have been a rapture on the Feast of Trumpets, and it didn't happen. Yeah, it was a big deal this year. That the rapture was going to be right down here before the 7 years. And the 7 years was going to begin in 2025 and end in 2032. Hey, maybe it did, but there wasn't a rapture. Maybe the Antichrist did enter this year. I don't know. But there wasn't a rapture. So all those people that were saying there's going to be a rapture, there's going to be a rapture, well, they were wrong, and I bet they're disappointed. And that's shallow. That's just way shallow. I mean, that's just too dumbed down for being prepared to rule and reign with Jesus in this earth. That's too dumbed down. You're going to have to raise your sights way up from that. And you're going to have to start getting in the Word as equally as intensely as these occult people get into their stuff. You're gonna have to do that, or you ain't gonna make it. You're not gonna die, and you're not gonna lose your salvation. You're just not gonna, you're gonna go the broad way. You see this, the Charlie Kirk, and then they have the memorial service. What kind of a memorial service is that? With fireworks and, fake tears. Come on, man. What? We can't see that? And all the MAGA and fakery that goes along with all of that stuff. Heck, they're beating the Clintons at their game, never letting a good crisis go to waste. They beat them at their own game. They're better at it than they were. Bill and Hillary got beat out by Donald Trump. He's better at it than them. They're pretty good at it. And they're still at it. They're still in the game. This is the gist of the matter. And see, God's called you out of this. It isn't that He doesn't want you to know what's going on. It's that, what does it say over there in Revelation chapter 2? He says this to the church at Thyatira. He says in Revelation 2:24, but to the rest of you in Thyatira who do not hold these teachings, who have not explored and known the depths of Satan. See that? As they say, I tell you that I do not lay upon you any other fresh burden, only hold fast to what you have until I come. See, He's talking about His second coming. And He's saying, hold fast to it. And he who overcomes and obeys my commands to the very end, I will, see? To the very end. To the very end. Not 7 years before. The very end. To the very end. I will give him authority and power over the nations. See, don't you think you're going to have to raise your sights up some more? I think so. And he shall rule them as a scepter of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces, and his power over them shall be like that which I myself have received from my Father. See that? Is that heady or what? That's heady. That's getting up there. That's starting to understand, hey, there's bigger things than dying and going to heaven. See? If your mother or father or somebody you love died and went to heaven, wonderful. Wonderful. Absolutely. It's wonderful to know where they are and that you're going to see them again. But we're not talking about that subject. We're talking about Jesus coming back to the earth and ruling and reigning, and you ruling with him and having that kind of power. That's learning the gist of the matter. You need to see the end times through that lens. If you don't see it through that lens, you're selling it short. You're coming up short. You're seeing really a blurry vision, and a bloody one too. And only bloody. I mean, we are going to have to know how to operate in this world to get through all this. And see, but the thing of it is, it's God's will for us to get through it all. He doesn't want us to fail. But you're not going to do it by being a great prepper. Even by being a great Christian prepper. Hey, do your prepping and you know, take advantage of it. Fine. But your prepping isn't what's going to get you to this level. That's not going to do it. It'll get you to live another day. And you can stop eating the processed foods that and poison that you're getting from the grocery stores now. And I don't want to get off into all that because it infuriates me. And I just hate talking about it. But that's what's happened to this country. And you know why? Because of covetousness, lust, and greed. That's why. They sold you out. Sold you out. You know, they never want to talk about the studies they did between vaccinated and unvaccinated children. I wonder how come that is. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring it up. These so-called serious scientists, they're so into their science and technology. You would think that they would love that kind of knowledge, right? No. They don't love that because they don't love the truth. They love what they're getting away with. They love that they're depopulating the earth and that they're going to get it all. That's what they love. They love themselves. I'm telling you, this is how evil it is. It isn't just a little evil. It's from one end to the other. They're going for it. You know, the truth doesn't mind being questioned. It doesn't. Truth doesn't mind being questioned. But they don't want to talk about what's true. And I will give him the morning star. And so when you read over there in Revelation chapter 12 about the woman, the church, not the Jews, and definitely not Mary, since it was written 60 years after the resurrection of Jesus. The church, in verse 5, and she, the church, brought forth a man-child, one who is destined to shepherd and rule all nations with an iron staff. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. What did I just read there in 2 Thessalonians 2:25? That he would give you a rod of iron and authority and dominion like he'd received from the Father, right? So that's not Jesus, is it? No, it isn't. It's the man-child, just like it says it is. Well, what's the man-child? Well, it's the overcomer that comes out of the church. When the church is over there at Charlie's funeral, you don't even know if he's dead. You don't know that. You don't know. You don't know anything about it. You got everybody's theories, but you don't know that. I always say if they'll do 9/11, they'll do anything. Anything. What a gamble. How reckless was that? How calculated, how devious, how intricate, how cunning. Wow. If you'll do that, you'll do anything. And they will. They'll do anything. And I'm telling you, you better get the gist of the matter. Look at there in Luke 21. See, because it's deception. Major, major deception. You know, like as was the days of Noah. Talk about deception. My goodness. In Luke 21:25, and there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations in bewilderment and perplexity, left wanting, embarrassed in doubt, not knowing which way to turn, at the roaring and the tossing of the sea. The sea is the masses of the people. Men swooning away and expiring with fear and dread and apprehension and expectation of the things that are coming on the world. For the very powers of the heavens will be shaken and caused to totter. Wow. That's the time we live in. And if you're not looking through that lens of total victory in Jesus, you're going to be swooning away with fear and apprehension of the things that are coming on the world. Because you're going to see some things in the next few months that's going to shake your world up. All of us. All of us. We're not talking tough here. All of us. It's going to shake us up. And who knows what that's going to be? Who knows? But you can imagine by reading God's Word, by getting the gist of the matter, Satan's kingdom is coming to an end. And he ain't going to go down easy. He's going to try to take it all out. In fact, he doesn't think he's going to lose. He's mad. He's demented. He's insane. I mean, look at the United Nations this week. You know, they had the General Assembly. Everyone walked out. All the nations' representatives walked out when Benjamin Netanyahu got up there. Church, that ought to tell you something. Oh, it does. It tells me the Jews are God's people and all the world hates God's people. No, it tells you that everybody's tired of being gaslit. They get tired of seeing a madman wipe out an entire group of people and look you square in the face and say, "We're not doing it." They're getting tired of it. They're beyond tired of it. Well, what do you think that's going to do to Israel? I mean, it says that all the nations go against them. So what does that tell you about what time we live in? I mean, at this point, if you're not convinced yet that we live in the end times, that should be a major sign to you that we are in the last days. Many false prophets will rise up and lead many into error. And we delude ourselves into thinking, oh, but not me. I won't be. That's foolish, folks. If possible. If possible. Where was that? Oh, it was Luke. It was Matthew 24. I was still over there in Luke. You know, it's Jesus giving this prophecy. Jesus, he's the spirit of all prophecy. 24:24, Matthew, false Christs and false prophets will arise, and they will show great signs and wonders as to deceive and lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Deceive and lead astray. Deceive and lead astray. You see, that's the time we live in. To deceive and lead astray. That's it. That's the name of the game. Deceive and lead astray. If possible, even the elect. And you think, well, what is a false prophet? Well, what are they telling you? They're telling you what the future is. And they're false. They're giving you a false future. You know, that could be a politician. They do it all the time. It could be a talking head at Fox News or CNN. You know, because that's all they do is prognosticate. It ad nauseum. It's nauseating. I walk through the room and I look at it and I'm just going, I just keep on walking. It's disgusting because it's just all a bunch of, you know, I think God He gets tired of hearing all the blabber. Babble. That's what He's tired of. All the babble from Babylon. You hear some, you know, kid in his 30s that, you know, he knows how to talk and he's got his talking points down, but you know he's not old enough to know what life's really about yet. Back then, I probably would have tuned in. But after you've lived a while and you find out what life's really like, you don't want to tune in anymore. You just don't want to listen to that babble. You're like, kid, it's nothing against you, man, but you don't know what you're talking about. But there's millions and millions of people out there that'll listen to them. They're false prophets. And the church is full of them too. The politics is full of them. The church is full of them. The TV's full of them. The internet's full of them. There's many of them. Jesus wasn't bumping his gums. He wasn't just putting out words. When he said many, he means many. And when he said that the ones going through the narrow way would be few, and that the many, the broad way, and the many are going to destruction. It didn't say hell, it says destruction. A lot of them probably are going to hell, but it says to destruction. So what do? You hold fast what you have, and you keep digging. You keep seeking. Don't stop looking at the internet. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you, figure it out. Let me tell you what you need. You need discernment. What was that? That Philippians. Let's look at that. Philippians. Discernment is what you need. And you think, well, you know, I can't do that. Yeah, you can. You don't have to leave it up to the preacher. In fact, if you don't leave it up to the preacher, you're doing yourself a really good service. Because you never get good at anything that you don't practice at it. And the more practice, the better you get. But in Philippians chapter 1, Paul says, and this, verse 9, and this I pray. So Paul was praying this. And this I pray, that your love may abound yet more and more and extend to its fullest development in knowledge and all keen insight, and that your love may display itself in greater depth of acquaintance and more comprehensive discernment. Now, let me give you an example of that. You know, lately, the algorithm, at least mine on my Facebook page, the algorithm has switched back over to fear radical Islam. Okay? And so when you fear them, you hate them. Right? Because you hate what you fear. So the push is, hate Islam and hate Muslims. And so that's not love, that's fear. And it says love turns fear out of doors. Okay? But if you don't listen to the propaganda that's trying to scare you into some kind of a submission and scare you into a certain camp and scare you into hatred, and if you don't fall for that propaganda and oh, this is what they do, and they come into your communities, and at first they're real nice until they all start having 7 or 8 or 9 kids each, and then they take over. And then it's radical Islam, and and every country has done this when they go to war with another country. In World War II, they depicted the Japanese as rats, and they probably did the same to us. And it's propaganda, folks. This is how this is how you conquer. You conquer through the mind. And so instead of falling for the propaganda of hate Muslims, go to God about it and go, hey, God, you died for them too. And in fact, Muhammad, the one who set up the religion, he came from Christianity. And although, hey, he got some things wrong, and, he went the way of, Joseph Smith and people like him who set up Mormonism, or maybe somebody that set up Scientology or something. It's just one guy that the devil can use to deceive a whole millions upon millions and generation after generation. And the truth be told, that those people want what you want. They just don't know they can have it yet. How does it say that? How can people know unless someone is sent? I think it's 1 Corinthians 1.
It's Romans 10.
Romans 10. Okay. So go to God and go, hey, God, I know some Muslims. And I do know some Muslims. And you know what? I don't have a problem with them. I don't. I talk to them. They talk to me. We see eye to eye. Okay, so their knowledge isn't very good. But there are huge numbers of Muslims come to Jesus now. In the Middle East and all over the world. They're coming to Jesus. Why? Well, in their Quran, Jesus is in their Quran, and the prophecies are there. And they know about our prophecies, and they want to know what's going on, just like everybody else in the world does. People want to know what's going to happen. And false prophecy isn't going to cut it. But if you love these people, he says that your love may abound, that it may display itself greater depth of acquaintance and more comprehensive discernment. And if you have discernment, say for the individual Muslim or for a nation of Muslims, or you just have better discernment because you don't hate and you don't fear. When you hate and you fear, that shuts your discerner off. Mm-hmm. You see that? When you get into fear and when you get into hate, your discernment stops right there. But if you go, no, I'm going to love these people. These people Jesus died for. These people he wants to save just like he saved me. He loves them just as much as he loves me. Then your discerner can stay open. You see that? And you can do that in every area of your life. Don't fall for the propaganda that Satan's given you. He can give it to you on a one-on-one basis, and he can give it to you through the boob tube that's trying to get a whole nation to hate a whole bunch of people that they don't need to be hating. I mean, this was evident when they, did the whole 9/11 thing, and then we went into the Middle East with the United States military and did all that destruction there. For what? For resources, for wealth, and other things even. And it was all done by getting the American people on board with it through fear of Islam. That's how they did it. That's propaganda. Propaganda is lies. It's lies. Because they want to get you to fear another nation and another people. And if you don't fear, then you can have discernment, and you don't have to fall out of love with them. And you can really understand and see the way God's seeing it. That is the gist of the matter. When you cut that off through fear, you're not getting the gist of the matter. You're falling for lies through fear. And those people who are doing this are evil. It's evil. Just because they're from your own country doesn't mean they can't be evil. That's how they got there, through evil. And we got to not fall for it, folks. Don't fall for it. In your heart go, no, I'm not accepting that. I am not accepting this blanket of you should fear them and hate them. I'm not accepting it. No, not doing it. And keep the love of Jesus in your heart about it. And then you'll understand. And everybody else around you, they ain't going to understand. Why? Because they fall for it. Because it works so well. Why? Because they don't educate themselves. It's too painful a matter for them. Well, it doesn't have to be if you keep the lens of the Word on. When you keep the lens of the Word, then it's not too painful. Then you can understand how the world really is. People do this all the time in their families. They do it in their neighborhoods. They do it in their little communities. They fear somebody. I mean, this is so classic. Back in the day, my parents grew up in New Orleans, and my dad lived right outside of the French Quarter, in a little shotgun house, and they had a French neighborhood, and they had an Italian neighborhood, and they had a black neighborhood, and different ethnic communities. And you didn't go in those other communities. Those kids would run you out. Why? Why would they do that? Because they feared. It was fear. And so there was that hatred and and then these rivalries. And you think God's happy with that? Wouldn't He want all nations to love one another? All those communities to come together and love one another? Yeah, that's exactly what He would want. But that's fallen man. That's how the world works. That's the gist of the matter. And when He's talking about that, Daniel, in Daniel chapter 7, He's telling you this is the way it's going to be in the last days. You're going to have this lion and this bear and this leopard and this other beast and this little horn and this Antichrist figure that comes forth. Right? And he says, he is going to corrupt the mighty men and the holy people. Well, how is he going to do that? Through information war. And the war is fear. And that's how he corrupts you. Because you will lose your discernment. You'll lose the love of Jesus for your fellow man. And you're done. That's how he beats you. Don't let him corrupt the mighty men and the holy people. Don't let it happen to you. And you know what? You're the only one that can do it. You have to rule your mind against it. You got to be smart enough and wise enough to go, hey, I've seen this before. You know what? I'm not going to believe that anymore. It's good to have a healthy distrust of your leaders. It's good to question everything. If you don't, who's going to do it for you? You should question everything. Question where it's coming from. Question their motives. You should have by this time, you should have a very healthy skepticism about anybody that leads in the world. You should. And if you don't, you need to do that. You need to make a practice of it. Because otherwise, your discerner is going to be turned off. And you're just going to follow the many. Because there's a sense of security in numbers. And so you're going to look for some group to find security in. And you know what? Usually God's people, they have to stand alone. Learn to stand alone, because you will get that test. It doesn't mean you have to be alone all the time, but I'm just saying be willing to stand alone, because you will. Elijah stood alone, Micaiah stood alone, Jesus stood alone, John the Baptist stood alone, Paul stood alone. They did. They had to stand up and be counted at one point or other in their life. Because you have to let God be true, though every man be a liar. You just got to settle that into your mind. You got to let God be true. So, Father, help us to be those people that you've called us to be. That we can be light and salt in the earth in these last days. And that people who hear us can be saved. Because we're only interested in you, Father, and the truth and what you're doing. And so we ask that you would develop that love in us so we can have that comprehensive discernment all the time. We ask it in Jesus' name.